Bekah Charleston, thank you so much. So, President Trump has just pardoned you. Congratulations. What was your reaction when you heard the news?
Jack, it is still surreal. It hasn't really sunk in yet. This is something I've been trying to do for years, and it was not an easy process. And so to finally have it happen the day before Christmas Eve is just surreal. It is amazing. It means that now like nothing will hold me back anymore, you know?
I was going to say, what a Christmas present this is.
Yes. It is. My mind is still just trying to process. Like I said, it was a really hard, long road. I had some amazing attorneys that helped me, with the application, but it's been years in the making. And so to have it finally happen now, amidst all the craziness of 2020, is such a gift.
So, talk to me about how this came about, because you mentioned this has been a long road in trying to get this. So, when did you start? When did you first apply? And talk to me a little bit about that process.
Yeah. So I have had some amazing pro bono attorneys that have helped. So as a survivor of more than a decade of human trafficking, part of my experience of exploitation included me going to federal prison for my trafficker. And so I served 13 months in 2006 for conspiracy to commit tax evasion. But Jack, it was for money that was never mine. And I just took the charge for my trafficker because I was too scared to tell on him. And so obviously I got out in 2007 and, I finally got away from him in 2009 and I started my life over in 2012, but I had this federal felony hanging over me all the time. And I wanted to do something about it. So I'm trying to advocate for the Trafficking Survivor Relief Act of 2020 with Senator Kristen Gillibrand out of New York. And that's a bill that would provide federal vacatur relief for trafficking victims like myself that have incurred federal felonies because of our traffickers. And so that's kind of the ultimate form of relief. And so in the absence of that, I decided to go for the presidential pardon. And so like I mentioned, Lee Goodmark is actually my pro bono attorney, and she has helped me over the years, because it was about 3 years ago we actually filed for this presidential pardon. And really it's a hard process because presidential pardons are designed for people that are truly guilty of crimes, and they're sorry for the crimes they committed, and the president decides to give them a pardon. And in my case, it wasn't so. In my case, I wasn't guilty of tax evasion because it wasn't my money, right? And I was only taking the charge out of fear of death, right? Out of fear of violence. And so even though we pressed forward and we applied, and it has been 3 years of questions. Every time they come back, it's 2 or 3 more pages of questions. And until finally this year, they came back and said, okay, the FBI is going to investigate you. And that's kind of a scary thing. I'm like, okay, and they investigated, I guess. And I didn't know anything until last night. So it was a complete surprise to me. And while it's not the ultimate form of relief, it is still a form of relief that I'm very grateful for. And I mean, I feel like now I can volunteer at my son's school. I can, maybe lead his soccer team as a volunteer coach. Those things that you don't think about when you have a criminal record that really holds you back, in life, that you don't want to. Yeah, I think it's one thing, Jack, when you get to tell your story now as a nationally recognized survivor leader in the anti-trafficking field. It's one thing when I get to tell my story because I choose to, when I get to tell it out of a position of strength and I get to tell it to help other people. But it's an entirely different shameful experience when you tell it because you have to. When you tell it to someone in the HR department, at a job, or someone at, YMCA, right? As an example, a volunteer coach. And it becomes a very shameful experience that you don't really want to have to go through all that. And so having this presidential pardon gets me one step closer to not having to go through all that.
And so let me ask you, when did you said you found out yesterday. So how did you get a phone call? Did you get a letter? What was it?
You know, Jack, it was actually a message from you. You were actually the first person that I think messaged me, and then my phone just started blowing up. So I had no clue. No, the pardon office of the United States did not call me. You know, they put it out in that press release, and then everyone started noticing and yeah, reached out. So it was a complete shock. I was actually out at a work Christmas party.
And what a celebration that must have turned into.
It sure did.
And so I wanted to ask you because you talked about so many different things, and one thing that the White House said in its release yesterday was that you have become a champion for survivors of all crimes, particularly sex trafficking, and that you've worked tirelessly to give a voice to the voiceless victims of sex trafficking. So when you hear the White House's description of yourself, of you, what goes through your mind?
I couldn't even read it last night. Even hearing you read it, it just makes me cry. It makes me cry to be recognized, you know, for starting over from nothing and finding my voice along the way and getting healing for myself, but then being able to turn around and help so many other people. And to hear the White House talk about me that way and recognize, you know, the hard journey it has been, because it hasn't been easy, but it's been so worth it. And so it feels amazing.
And so talk to me a little bit about how you are helping people now.
So I was previously the executive director of the actual program that helped me, which is called Valiant Hearts. And I became the executive director of that in 2017. And earlier this year, right about COVID pandemic time, I had another opportunity come up. And so now I am the strategic initiatives director at the Jensen Project. And so the Jensen Project, I get to work with an amazing woman, Janet Jensen, who is our founder. And she is a survivor of many forms of violence herself and is now a philanthropist that decides to turn around and fight sexual violence. And so we launched our grant tank this year, which was our first time to launch this official RFP, request for proposals. And we are funding $2 million in anti-trafficking organizations that have housing programs or economic empowerment programs. So although my title and my workplace has shifted, I'm still very much in the fight and very much helping other women to hopefully recover or possibly prevent them from having the experiences that I've had.
You mentioned all the help that you're providing these women who are trapped in this world. And I'm wondering, you said before that you were prosecuted and you went to prison because you were too afraid to, tell the authorities about the pimp. And so I'm wondering, what was it like for you being trapped and basically being beaten for all those years? I mean, did you ever think that you would be able to escape?
No, I never did, Jack. Like, honestly, my pimp, when he would beat us and he would tell us, you'll be broke, fat, and ugly, and no one will ever love you, and you're always going to be looked at like you're a whore, and you'll never make anything out of yourself. You'll never be anything without me, is what he would used to say. And so for me, running was about escaping the violence. It was about trying to run and hide and change my identity before he hunted me down and killed me. And he was in prison and I was terrified of him. I actually got ill every day for 30 days, even though he was in federal prison, Jack. That's how scared I was to leave that man. And I finally did. And for me, I wish life got better then, but physical freedom doesn't equal emotional or mental freedom. And so it was still a long road. It took me years from that point to finally understand the abuse, because honestly, I believed it was all my fault. I believed the things he said about me. I believed that I was stupid and that I made bad choices and that I got what I deserved. And it took a lot of other people. It took a community of support coming around me and saying like, no, that 17-year-old girl that met that 37-year-old man, I never woke up one day and said, I want to be a prostitute. I never woke up and said I wanted to do any of those things. Those are things I was forced and manipulated and coerced into doing. And I never thought I would do any of the things that I get to do today. Today I get to travel. I'm in pre-COVID. I'm in front of anywhere from 5 to 10,000 people a year, training on this topic, using my voice to educate others. I'm a lived experience expert, obviously what I've been through, but also what human trafficking looks like in America. To be able to, lead an organization that helps those very women, and now to be able to work with a philanthropist that helps fund those organizations. Like, I never thought I would get to do any of that. I thought I would be broke, busted, and disgusted the rest of my life. And here I stand today. I'm the mom of an amazing 8.5-year-old little boy, and I own a home today. My credit's been repaired. I got a presidential pardon. I mean, I never thought I would be here.
Do you think that the federal government and all of your efforts and everybody who you have worked with, is it making a dent? I mean, because if you think about back when you were prosecuted back in 2006, and here we are in 2020, I mean, did we really know what was going on back then?
No, in all fairness, no. I mean, human trafficking wasn't even a buzzword back then. People still thought it was a thing that happens over there in those countries, and nobody really understood. It was actually a neighbor that had tipped off the federal investigator that began investigating us and following us literally across the country, trying to figure out what was going on. And they were trying to bust this prostitution ring, is what they called it. And they knew that the pimp, the man, was in control, but since we wouldn't talk, they didn't know how else to investigate it without our testimony. And so that's what we're really looking forward to today. At this point, when you look at the evolution of domestic violence, where it was a home issue and we weren't going to investigate it. And now we see today that the state can actually press charges. Even if the victim doesn't cooperate, if she's too scared to testify, the state will still press charges, right, against the abuser. And so we would love to see that move forward with human trafficking, where the victims don't, if they're not in a place that they're ready to testify or cooperate, that we can still move forward with an evidence-based prosecution. So there's some amazing groups like Collective Liberty, as an amazing organization that's training law enforcement on how to do more advanced human trafficking investigations, so that we don't have to rely so heavily on victim cooperation.
I remember what you said when we first spoke 3 years ago. You told me that being prosecuted saved your life.
Yeah, it did. I mean, honestly, and I don't advocate, right, for arrests to be a part of the solution, but for me, honestly, going to federal prison for 13 months was a vacation for me. From the life I was living, I got to sleep every single night. I got to eat 3 meals a day. I didn't have people touching my body that I didn't want touching me. And it honestly got me away. And then being on federal supervised release, which is basically parole for 3 years, it forced me to create a life away from my trafficker, and it didn't make me leave right away. I still stayed for a couple years, but it eventually definitely led to me finally finding my own feet under me, and knowing that I can escape, I can get away, and that my life doesn't have to be like this.
And the fact that, I mean, I think listening to you and your overall message is that never lose hope.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, hope changes everything. I think having hope in yourself, having hope that things can be different, that you can start over. I started over with $1 million of debt in my name, Jack. Been arrested 10 times, had a federal felony. I was pregnant, and I had no idea who I was and what I was going to do with my life. All I knew is I didn't want a day of my son's future to look anything like my past. And so I started, and I think that hope it is honestly what did it. Because if you don't have hope, then you'll never jump.
And one other question I had is the White House said even the IRS case agent who prosecuted this case and did an interview with you with Ginger and the prosecutor Andrew Stover and one of the women who was a victim as well back in 2018. Even this case agent was very much in favor of this. Have you talked to him since the news broke?
No, I haven't. Actually, I should call him right after we get off the Zoom. He and I have about 40 or 50 messages on my phone right now that I haven't been able to check yet. But um, to be able to stand on a stage, we actually presented together at a conference. The other victim, Rebecca Bender, and myself, she was there for 3 out of my 10 years. And Andrew Stover, who literally put me in prison, and to stand next to him on a stage and him to have his arm around me in photos and to be able to now them to actually fully understand our story and what was going on and to be able to say, hey, we always wanted to help you, but we just didn't know how to. They didn't have the tools back then, as you mentioned. And so to now be able to stand up with them and have even Mark Parsons, the agent that investigated us and literally followed us across the country, to have him now advocating for me to be able to have my record removed is surreal. It's amazing.
Well, congratulations again, and Merry Christmas to you, and stay healthy. And thank you so much for sharing again your story with us.
Thank you so much, Jack. Great
All
to see
right,
you again.
nice to see you. You take care.
You too.